Welcome to Roots and Resilience. I'm Dr. Tejal.
And I'm Dr. Nehal. We have had some incredible conversations with inspiring individuals that we feel compelled to share with you all.
Listen with an open mind and an open heart. You never know, you might just pick up a pearl that might spark something in you. Enjoy.
Welcome to another episode of Roots and Resilience. We are so excited to have Disha join us today. Disha is a clinical pharmacist. Last year, she took a career break, moved to Mexico, and co-founded a business called Ollinova, an exciting initiative which we are going to hear more about. Welcome, Disha.
Thank you. Thank you, Nehal and Tejo. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited for where this conversation takes us.
Same. And I want to start off by saying that Nell and I grew up in a football mad household. I think it's toned down a little bit, but obviously the World Cup was a massive deal. And you guys are in Mexico right in the middle of the World Cup. So what is it like there right now?
It's amazing, actually. I guess this World Cup's a little bit different because it's being hosted by three countries. But I think the vibes in Mexico, I would say, probably surpass the other two countries. You can literally see there's a huge craze, not just like obviously when Mexico is playing, it's great, but there's so much support for some of the South American countries as well. Like yesterday, Colombia was playing, and the streets were crazy. There's like horns, and on the weekend, we went to a World Cup parade, and they kind of did a mock-up of like the Dia de la Muerte parade, which is like the Day of
I
the Dead
saw
parade.
that. That's a really big thing in Mexico, right?
Yeah, and
There's
obviously,
actually that Disney movie, Coco, that I watched
yes.
that talks
So
about this tradition. But yes, no, expand. Tell our listeners briefly what this festival is about.
yeah, so I mean, it's usually a festival that's around Halloween, although people confuse it for Halloween, but essentially it's a lot more than just dressing up in fancy dress. It's actually a day, it's a celebration for the people who've passed and crossed over to the other side. So in a way, a lot of Mexican traditions are so similar to the Indian traditions. So they have during that week of celebration, they have rangoli, and they do like little prayers, and they have an altar which is a bit like an ankot in Diwali for all the people who've passed away. They put their favorite dishes and whatever favorite items were like more special to them, like they display that against their photos. So it's a great celebration. Obviously, the actual one is way like grander and bigger and like more, elaborate. But they kind of did something along those lines just for, I guess, all the tourists and the fans that visited for the football World Cup. So that was like, it was great to watch. And yeah, like I think Mexico City in particular is very busy. There's so many tourists. But like the vibes are great, and yeah, we're loving it.
It's
Soak it in.
amazing how exactly so and it's amazing how you chose Mexico to move to, which we can also touch on later. And you get to experience the World Cup. So it's, double whammy there. So let's roll it back. Tell us about little Disha growing up. What was she like?
Um, Great question. I think it's great to start from the childhood because I feel like a lot of our life is really defined by it. I think for me, so I was born in Nairobi, Kenya, and we were, I guess, a very small family. So it was just my mom, dad, me, and my sister. I'm the elder sibling, and in terms of immediate family, we didn't really have a lot of immediate family in Kenya. So like all of my first cousins were really very much in India. And so when we were in Kenya, we were pretty much surrounded by either distant relatives or just friends. And those people kind of became family, right? So it was, and Kenya is a very close-knit community. Everyone knows everyone. So I think in that sense, it was great. And growing up as a child, I think in school, we went to community school, but I was probably I would probably say the good kid, I did everything right. I was like obedient, the one everyone could rely on, the responsible one, especially even with my looking after my sister, and my parents were working as well. So I think a lot of that, I guess, responsibility came from a very young age. But I was also, I guess, from in school, I was also like, I guess, good at winning, right? So I was always the high achiever. And I think I remember in our house, we had almost over the window, there's curtains, and I had so many trophies. And, at that time, you're kind of striving for these achievements, but that became a very close part of my identity. I was known to be the kid who did really well in school, who won all the trophies, whether it's not just academically, in sports, in chess, in, public speaking, whatever. So I think that became a very big part of my identity growing up. And then, like people start to recognize that from you as well. And I guess then it came to a point of, okay, what am I going to do with my life after when I came into A levels and deciding what I want to do in terms of my career? And everyone was like, oh, your grades are great. You should just be a doctor. And for me, I guess from a young age, I guess I had this value of freedom, which I hadn't really recognized at that point. But I knew that I didn't want to be a doctor because I just didn't want to be like studying for the rest of my life. I wanted that freedom in terms of a life. And I guess I didn't know better. I think it's really hard when you're at that point in life where you have to choose a career, but you don't really have a strong calling for anything. I knew I liked sciences, and so I just defaulted to do pharmacy because I couldn't think of any options. It was also this mindset of, oh, looking for a job that gives you financial stability. And everyone was like, for women, it's a good work-life balance. You can do so much with pharmacy. And so just fell into it. It wasn't really a calling. And then I decided that's what I was going to pursue. And so then I moved to the UK for university and stayed on after for work. And yeah.
Wow, that's really lovely. Thank you for sharing that. I think Nell and I can resonate, as in I'm an older sibling, so I definitely have a bit of eldest daughter syndrome, if you've ever come across it. Being that responsible one, being the one who takes care of everything, does what she's told, and you don't realize it, but you're so conditioned to be like always seeking approval from whoever's, whether it's a parent or someone above you all the time. And Nell was like the topper of everything. Literally, she was like, she's the trophy girl. So that literally became part of her identity. And I think both of those things with life, you go on a journey and you recognize, hang on, some of these things need a bit of addressing. Well, experiences sometimes will make you introspect and be like, okay, why is this happening? Why am I feeling this way? What's going on here? Disha, I want to pick up on a couple of things. So you mentioned freedom was like a value you later on realized was important to you. What does freedom feel like and look like for you?
I think for me, freedom is about being able to do what I want, the way I want, and when I want to do it. And I mean, it can pan out in different ways across different parts of your life. But for me, I think it's having that free will to be able to decide what I want to do and do it without restrictions, red tape, practicalities, and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think that's what freedom means to me.
And when did you realize that that was a value for you? Was there a moment where you thought, do you know, I feel really tied down. I feel stuck.
Yeah.
When was it that you realized that shift?
I think very much later on in life. So I'd say I've had a few moments of aha. And one of the biggest moments for me, the one that really shook me, was when I burnt out. And that's when I actually started evaluating, looking at doing a lot of the inner work. And that's when I realized the reasons why I'm struggling with certain things more than others, the reasons why I feel so constrained, the reasons why I feel unhappy are because some of my values, for example, freedom, are not being honored. I think for me, it was very much later on in life, because I think when you're younger, you just do life as everyone. It's like there's always something to look out for after school, you go to university. After university, it's about work. And so you're just following that race of life. And you're never really introspecting in that detail. I've always been a very self-aware person. I've always been aware of certain feelings and things like that, but I've never really introspected to the depth that I could actually trail some of the reasons why my behaviors were panning out or the reasons why I was being triggered. So it was a lot later on in life that I actually did that work.
I think
but
that's
you know
usually,
it's
yeah,
sorry,
I
go
think
on.
that usually is the case, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
because you're
It's
kind
same
of
with us.
yeah, as in I think it's very common, especially in Asian women in the diaspora, like massively, because I think especially there is so much unsubliminal pressure to be raised in a particular way. And even though you might be like, okay, I didn't feel like I had loads of pressure to study or but it was there, even though it might not have been like explicit. And I
Said, yeah.
and I think that leads to, it's a recipe for burnout later in life, 100%. So yeah, I think freedom, I feel really, I don't know about you, Nahal, but I feel like it's one of my values because I feel like it again came apparent, I think, through inner work and stuff over years, but also little things like I might be abroad somewhere and I can't go out at night by myself, or I can't travel, get from A to B by myself. Somebody has to come with me. So it might even be like somewhere in India. And even though I speak the language and I know things, but it's not safe and you can't. And I'm like, oh, this is really frustrating. But equally, I think it's something I find women before us probably may not have had. And as like first generation of women who've had potentially opportunities that the women before us didn't have, like we carry that with us a little bit. I certainly do. And also just yeah, like it also you just had so much more choice. And I think you're so aware of that you're like, wow, this is such a privilege. I'm not gonna give up this privilege that I've had. Now you're gonna say something.
Yeah, I know how Tejral's touched on this before, the trophy girl, be topping everything, being so academically able. I only realized later on in life how that has impacted me. And for me, the way, and I'm really interested to hear how that's impacted you, but the way it impacted me was I wasn't very good at failure or accepting failure because I'm not used to it. I'm used to getting 100% or doing really well or getting that medal, being like, Nehal, well done. And then I start relying on that external validation. How did it show up for you?
Yeah, it was, yeah, pretty much an identity thing. So when I was in Kenya, that's what I was known for. Everyone would look at me and expect that. And I'd never failed to deliver that. You know what I mean? So when I came to London, in a way, there was a bit of liberation from that identity, being recognized as the girl who's going to do well. And it wasn't like anyone really said it to me. Even my parents never really said it to me, although maybe what was driving me was seeing them proud from those achievements, right? So that was what was driving me. But I think it had just become part of my identity. So when I came to London and I went straight into university and I was like a nobody for nobody for everyone. So it's like nobody knows my history, and it was like great. It was very liberating. But then even though I had left the environment that gave me the identity, I was still carrying that identity within myself. So there were moments in university where in my first year, I actually failed one exam and I had to do a retake. And for me, that was a huge slap on the face because I'm like, I've never done a retake in my life. So it was almost like that. Those were moments that I started understanding that actually I don't need to live with this identity that defines that I have to be the best at everything. But those were just small moments. What I found was where this played out to me a lot was not really in a work or achievement setting. It was more in my personal life. So it was about being good at other things outside work, being the good daughter, but it wasn't even that precious so much. It was more around my relationships, especially with marriage, being a good wife, being good at managing relationships in the house, those kinds of things. And again, these were things that nobody really ever said to me that I have to do. Nobody even said to me that you're not doing it well. But it was just playing in my mind subconsciously that, oh, I need to be a bit extra here. And you hear these from even things that you've watched growing up, like TV shows and other people's marriages. And you kind of project that to your own life. And I was just like, oh, like, and I think the largest part was even before I got married was when I was not able to, like I was almost 32 and I hadn't found anyone like who I could say that I want to call my life partner. And again, for me, that was failure because I was like, why is everyone else succeeding at that and I'm failing? So it was playing out a lot in the non-career setting, if that makes sense. And I was just feeling like a failure because I wasn't achieving the milestones that everyone else was achieving. So, yeah.
It's incredible how these milestones that no one's set, there's no rule book for this, right? But we absorb, whether it's from the movies, through society, or what the majority are doing. Suddenly, if your path doesn't align with what the majority are doing or what you feel is expected of you, that can be incredibly unsettling. I can think it can lead to a lot of self-doubt, make you wonder what's wrong with me, what am I doing wrong? And the thing is, all the things you talked about, Disha, and I'm no therapist, definitely not that, but Nahal also from just being like that overachiever is no one's going to give you an achievement or a physical validation for being a great daughter or a daughter-in-law or a, great sister. Like, you're not going to get that. And so because you're so used to having your self-validated in those kind of academic achievements, trophies, medals, blah, 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 I can understand. You're just like, am I doing this right? Am I not doing this right? It's just so different to what you're used to, because then having that validation, you're like, this is great. I'm doing whatever I'm doing is working. Let me carry on. It's a work. That's for me.
It almost perpetuates you, the action. You keep pleasing, you keep wanting to be this, your ideal best version of yourself as a sister, as a daughter, as a wife, as a daughter-in-law. But I see, and it was the same for me. It panned out in different aspects of my life, and I had to say, enough is enough. I need to not get rid, but really tame this part of my identity. It's not my identity. Yes, at some point it was, but it isn't. So thank you for sharing that. That's really amazing. And I know our listeners will resonate. So
can I say something? I have a burning thing to say, is actually that on this subject of, not being married when you're 30 or whatever, I think a lot of people need to hear this, whoever's listening.
It's okay if you aren't
like
married.
You have not failed at life if you're not married by 30, 31, 32, 40, whatever it is, or you haven't popped out a few babies before a certain age. I think this is so important. I've gone through questioning all of those things because I can totally resonate with that, Disha. And I know that I've met incredible women, not even in 30s, 40s, 50s. They've got so much going for them. And then it's really interesting. This one part of their life just doesn't fall into a nice little package box. People can be like, oh, you've got it all together type thing. And it can be really overwhelming. It can really bring you down in other areas of your life. And I think it's really important to actually, whatever it is, seek help or have good people around you to be able to lean on if you're feeling a certain way. Like I think it does really force you to do loads of inner work and introspect and try and find yourself to be like, I'm way more than what my marital status is, or whether I've got kids or not got kids and stuff, because it doesn't leave you, right? It might just be the first things, oh, you're not married by a certain age, and then it's like you've not had kids by a certain age. It just doesn't stop, right? And you could be like, when's your second kid? It just doesn't stop. And this is what do you guys have to say on this? How can someone who's listening to this be like, who they're feeling behind in life, what could help them?
Yeah, I think this is like interesting question that you've pulled up, because when we designed the work that we're doing now is essentially around addressing all of these things, and these are the phases that we went through in terms of dealing with it. And the main thing to really think about, especially when you are thinking about how can you address this, it's essentially thinking about, the way I explain it is, imagine your success or your story, or your success is climbing a mountain. So if you're climbing a mountain, you need to make sure that, first of all, that mountain is yours to climb. Because a lot of us are climbing other people's mountains, and that's our conditioning, right? So sometimes you've decided to become a doctor because everyone in your family is a doctor, but really all you care about is art and like being a painter, maybe. So you need to, first of all, make sure you're climbing your own mountain. Secondly, you need to make sure that when you're climbing the mountain, the metrics of success that you're using to measure yourself with are yours. So these milestones, again, are defined by society, graduating by having a job, your first job by 21, being married by 30, having kids by 35. All of these milestones are what society has set. And yes, there may be some logic in terms of why those would have worked for people before us, in terms of like our ancestors were looking for financial stability and security. There's something around the biological clock of being able to conceive well. All of those things make sense, but essentially you need to think about your life and your rhythm in that life in terms of what is the pace that you want to go through this life. And based on that pace, what is the metrics and what's important for you? So like your values, your goals, and what is important for you, because you may decide, actually, my priority is to really build on my career and to make it, I don't know, Forbes top 30, like being at the top of like doing really well.
Yeah.
And you may decide that's your priority, and like maybe like that's your, again, that might be aligned to your values, and maybe you don't really want to have a family. So then you don't need to have that pressure of this metric that's decided by others as your milestone. So it's about thinking about your mountain and what your milestones are, or your checkpoints in that mountain is, and then measuring yourself up for success against those rather than the generic ones.
That's
Thanks.
beautiful. And I think that really is a really good analogy and metaphor that people can use. And I think what comes to mind is that I remember when people used to ask me, what's your 5-year plan after you're a dentist? What are you going to do? Do you want to specialize? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Or what do you want? And that's probably the hardest question for a lot of people, or if not everyone. What do you actually want? And you need to figure that out before you decide, obviously, what your mountain looks like, and then you can figure out where you're going and what your path is. But it's about giving yourself time to reflect and introspect and figure out, what do you actually want? Because I remember being asked that and I had no idea. It would be like really superficial stuff. Yeah, I'd love to go on holiday. I'd love to get this. But those were actually quite superficial compared to what I really realized, what I truly desire. And actually, when I did some introspective work, I actually realized that what I truly desire is peace of mind, contentment. I just want peace of mind. That's it. Which is so simple, but so different to what I thought I wanted. So I think that's really interesting. And I think that also brings us nicely onto the work that you're doing. So you took a career break last year. Was that the point you felt burnt out and you're like, I need to do something about it?
No, actually, what happened was I had the episode of being burnt out, I think it was 2023, and I took the career break in 2025. So about 2 years after. I guess the burnout wasn't, again, it was a buildup of all these pressures that I had running in my head, all these beliefs and conditioning, to a point where I felt like I just couldn't hold it anymore. For me, at that point in that time, that wasn't what I thought it was, right? So I ended up in hospital. I had these postural headaches, and they thought that I had a hole in my spine, like a cerebral spinal leak. And they said it's a very rare condition, doesn't happen. And I remember thinking to myself, why has this happened to me? And I was really scared, really shaken, because they couldn't, there was no explanation, but there was also no cure. So it was like, you just have to deal with it. And I was like, am I just going to have these postural headaches for the rest of my life? Like, how can I live my life like this? And I was a pharmacist, and being a pharmacist, I'm quite anti-drugs. I don't really want to take medicine. And obviously, the first thing they were offering me was painkillers. And I was like, I don't want to be like popping pills for the rest of my life. So for me, that was it really shook me. It turns out later on, I had to then, I just knew that there was something more to this. My gut was telling me there's something more to this. So whilst I was in this situation of postural headaches, I started seeking a lot of alternative modalities to help me through it. And every person I went to was telling me the same thing. You have a lot of energy stuck in your head. And I'm a pharmacist, so I've always been very rational, science, rational brain, thinking about it. I'm like, okay, what do you mean energy stuck in your head? And I was like, okay, fine. But at that point, I was so desperate. I just needed something to help me feel better. So I tried reflexology, I tried Reiki, I tried all these different modalities. And then I went to a cranial osteopath. And it was really weird, because the session that I went to, literally, I did massages and everything was giving me symptomatic relief, but everyone was saying all your energy is stuck up here in your head. And I went to this cranial osteopath. I lay in a session, and literally all he did was put one hand under my head and one hand under my sacrum. And he just sat there. And I'm grounding you. And I was just like, really? Like, at that point, I was just like, does this thing even work? But I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go with it. And in one session, I was 70% better. And that's when I literally started leaning into this because I was like, oh my God, so there is something about energy. And like everyone says, everything is energy, but you just sometimes take it as words that are superficially being thrown around. But I really then felt it. And I'm like, there's so much energy in my head. And that's when I started really tapping into everything that was going on inside me. And one thing led to another. So that's like when I really started going deeper in terms of my inner work. And a few months later, I went on a retreat, which was more of like a breathwork retreat. And that really unlocked so much for me in terms of really understanding where all these beliefs of mine were sitting, how they were impacting me. And since then, I started exploring more and more of all of this. Obviously, it helps that my husband's also a yoga breathwork instructor. And we started spending a lot more time in doing all of these things. And that's when we realized that actually, coming back to your question about moving to taking this career break, I think I was already in the process of healing and understanding myself, but I think we realized that maybe there's so much noise around us, and maybe we should just take a year to just step away from it. So our whole idea in terms of moving to Mexico was, yes, A, to travel, because that was one of the things that we really enjoyed. But it was also just a chance for us to step away from everything that we know, go somewhere where nobody knows us. It's a very new environment where the language is different, the culture is different, and really just immerse and use that opportunity for growth. Was more for our personal growth. And we were obviously doing a lot of work around all of this on the side anyway. So like I'd become a holistic coach. I was coaching a lot of people on the side. We were holding retreats. And we found that there was so much about this work that we really enjoyed and we wanted to share. But then at the same time, we were using Mexico as a time to just take a break and just clean, like hear ourselves through the noise and decide what, what is the direction that we want to, how do we want to live our life that feels really true and authentic to us. So that's actually what led us to make that decision to move.
Hey, are you enjoying this episode? If you are, you might love our monthly newsletter.
It's where Nehal and I share podcast updates, community news, upcoming events, reflections, ideas, and some fun extras.
You can sign up at the link in the show notes.
Back to the conversation.
Wow, that is incredible. And I think, yeah,
I think
I'm
that's-
just in awe because there's so many moments where I could relate. So many moments. When you
I
said
think
the
it's-
energy is stuck up there, I think a lot of us have it. And I used to actually get loads of migraines as well when I was younger. They calmed down because I think I was eating too much cheese. So when I went vegan, like my headaches went. But but what you talk about noise really resonates. I just came back from Vipassana 2 months ago, or a month ago, but yeah, 3 weeks ago rather. And I literally like had a cry on Friday because I was like to my husband, what is this world that I live in? It's too much for me. I'm so overstimulated. Like I genuinely experienced mental peace at Vipassana where I didn't have my phone, there was no Wi-Fi, it was silence for 10 days. And now I came back into this real world and I was like, what is this? What are we living in? We don't even realize how overstimulated we are, especially being clinicians. You're constantly making decisions every single day. And it was overwhelming. It was too much. So I think it's incredibly brave that you've stepped back and you've said, yeah, I want to get rid of the noise, and you've gone far, far away.
But I think for clarity, you need to dial down those distractions.
Yes.
And I think that was one of the biggest take home messages when I don't know, I think if you need a break or if you need a career break, I think you kind of know, like you just know internally, like I need just to step off this treadmill. And
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of courage to actually go through with it, but also it takes time to put it into motion and to actually, and I guess if you're doing it with your partner or with someone, you've got to align your journeys for it to happen, for you guys to do it together. So that takes a lot of planning. Yeah, so tell me a bit about this holistic coaching stuff that you do, Disha.
Yeah, so actually my coaching journey started while I was working as a pharmacist. I think when I was going like again with my career, I was doing really well, I was progressing, but I'd reached a point where I was maybe I'd reached the ceiling and I wasn't feeling as stimulated. The work was kind of getting repetitive and monotonous. I wasn't feeling inspired or stimulated. And I remember having this conversation with my manager, and like she was like, "Oh, like why don't you look at other things?" And like at that time, there was actually a coaching, an external company that was setting up a coaching certification program within our trust. So I kind of went for that. And one thing led to the other. Like I really enjoyed it. And then I went on to do more of the advanced trainings, and I became one of the senior coaches within the trust. But what I realized is I loved the coaching because it was a breath of fresh air, in the sense that it was like the approach was great. It was not like therapy, it was very different. But then the more I started coaching people, I realized that there was also some, I guess, rigidity and restraints with the system. So like again, going back to my value of freedom and like, like being like, I think what I've realized, especially with all the work that I do, is like I don't like to be caged or red taped. I like having the free will of like making things my own, like going a bit off the norm. And I think with coaching as well, as I found that like, the whole concept of coaching is based on asking people questions but not really giving advice. So you're basically using that to kind of really empower them, and that's great. But there are limitations because sometimes you can actually see where someone's stuck. And coaching really works at the conscious brain level. So like if you think about our mind, 5% of all our processing activity is the conscious mind, and 95% of everything else that runs the show for us is in the subconscious mind. Now, for anyone to make any change in their life, that's where also like your beliefs sit in as well. So if you want to make any substantial change in your life, you really need to go down into your subconscious mind. And sometimes there are all of these practices, even therapy like CBT, everything, like they work at the conscious mind level. In coaching, it also works to an extent at a conscious mind level because it's all about helping you set goals and like thinking about things very rationally. But like if your nervous system, if your body isn't ready for accepting the change, if your beliefs are so embedded that you can't even get to them, and you're never going to be able to sustain any change. And so I realized that, like I couldn't just stick to coaching. It had to be a bit more holistic. And so it kind of, through the work that like, we'd been doing together with my husband in terms of like breath work, somatics, nervous system work, we realized that actually there is so much power in combining these modalities into more of an holistic approach. So using these tools in a coaching session as well, using these tools in terms of embedding daily habits, because if you're trying to change something, it's not like a switch, it's not going to happen overnight. And so that's kind of why I went down the holistic coaching route, because I realized that I can't just stick to the traditional coaching model where you bring in like tools and it's all mindset work at a conscious level. You really need to have something that really penetrates down to the subconscious to help make that change last.
That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, totally agree, by the way.
I think Nehal definitely in her recent meditation course, like retreat, she definitely said that actually tapping into the subconscious brain is really hard, and it takes time and a lot of work. Like you said, it's not just there's no like shortcut to it. You've got to put in the work, but also use the tools that you have. And Nehal and I absolutely massive advocates for coaching because I'll just share with you that the only reason I was able to facilitate my sabbatical was because at the time I was affiliated to a trust. I went through a coaching program through the trust to try and be like, look, I need to take time off. Like, I just don't know how I can make this happen. And that really enabled me to kind of break it down and stuff. And I thought, this is real value in it. But interestingly, Nehal and I also do a lot of teaching. I did. Nehal does a lot more now. But as a result of that role, I got basically put on this like coaching and mentoring course, and I was like, oh, this sounds so dull, like the whole waste of life. Like, but it was free, it was paid for, and so we kind of just did it. We were like, okay, whatever, we've got nothing to lose. And I guess my expectations were so low, but although they were training us to be, better mentors and coaching, it really gave me such an opportunity because you're kind of like practicing on each other, you're paired up with people and things like that. It was like, wow, like I was learning about so much about myself through the process. I was like, this is really powerful. And then beyond that, I think the both of us have been kind of dipping in and out of like various coaching programs maybe, or like things like
Yeah,
that.
there's
So
immense value in it. Immense value. And I think it's I think sometimes things in your life come at a particular time when you need them.
Yeah.
So, you needed some variety. Coaching came along, and what a great thing to do. And now it's helping you facilitate and run your initiative in Mexico, which is amazing. What's your goal in terms of what you want to do?
I mean, that's like a very powerful question, but I think the goal is really to change and like really touch and make an impact on as many lives as possible. And like our mission statement for Ollinova is actually like we really believe very deep down that personal growth leads to collective healing. So like it's a bit of a domino effect. So like the minute you grow, evolve, and become a better person, you're going to kind of touch on other people's lives, and it's going to impact other people. So it's like a domino effect. And I think our vision is really to get that, like to really impact as many people as possible. I think there's just so much suppression, there's so much ignorance, and there's so much disconnection in the world today. As humans, we're wired to be connected, but the rate of disconnection is crazy. And I think that's what's causing all of these problems, like in terms of, even if it's chronic health issues, mental health problems, just like this increasing rates of depression. And I think people are just really struggling. And it's because nobody is really wiring down or connecting to the origins of, like, human connection, about understanding your body, listening to your body, listening to your intuition. And I think with all the work that we've kind of, like done on ourselves, but also trained in over the years, I think it's just become more and more evident how everything is so related. I as one of the things I also trained to do was Akashic reading, and that's taking on things in with a more spiritual lens. But again, it's kind of touching on the same thing about how some of these patterns, everything that you're living in your life is really like an effect of the experiences that you've had either as a child, but from an Akashic lens, it's your spiritual, like, like the experiences your soul has had in other lifetimes, whether you believe in that or not. But it's like everything is related, nothing is a coincidence. And so for us to really, really, like you said, Neha, I love that you said that what you ultimately wanted was contentment, right? It's not like you were searching for a big goal, and you'll be surprised at how universal that feeling is. Everyone that you ask, when you ask them, when we do this visualization meditation, everyone taps into that feeling, the feeling of contentment. But so all these material things don't really matter, because ultimately what everyone's searching for is that feeling of peace, contentment. And it's just that there's so much noise that people are, and that there's so many distractions that people just can't seem to find a way to get there. And so the real, I guess, the real thing, the needle that's going to move, the needle mover is essentially just really tuning into like yourself, your intuition, listening to your body, and understanding how some of the things that has wired you can be rewired at a deeper level. So yeah.
Amazing. And question for you, breath work. Now, I think I've been really skeptical about breath work. I've tried it a lot. 5 minutes, I'll try breathing, I'll get bored, and then I'm like, I'm done. But I read about it, and I think Tejo, you were reading the book. Was it Breath? Is that the book?
I'm reading that book now, but I
You're
also read
reading
the
that book,
Wim Hof
but
book.
I remember, and you've read Wim Hof, and then I bought Wim Hof and I started reading that. I did my cold showers, and yeah, did cold plunges, did it all. And then, Tej will message me being like, the breath is everything. One day, it was just literally loads of WhatsApps all about the breath, like the breath is everything, need to do more breathing, this. And I was just like, I know it. I know the breath's so important. Even with Vipassana, when you're breathing, like breath is everything. For someone skeptical about breath, or maybe wants to get better at breath work or give it a really good go, what would you suggest? Is it finding a retreat? Is it starting in your home? What's ideal?
So thank you for bringing that question. Actually, I've had a lot of thoughts as you were saying this. And I think one of the biggest things to remember before I even get to answering the question is there's I guess maybe I'm going off on a tangent, but essentially there's so many different modalities. And even with breathwork, there's so many different types of breathwork. So I guess with social media today and the way the world is working, there's a lot of, I guess, limelight on wellness. And there's so many like quirky different things. It's almost confusing what to go for. And when we think of breathwork, we think of the trendy ones, the ones that are more available. And Wim Hof is an example, right? Wim Hof is very popular, but again, Wim Hof is a different type of breathwork. So when we're thinking about breathwork, we need to also remember that there are different types of breathwork. There's types of breathwork that help you upregulate. There's types of breathwork that help you downregulate. There's breathwork to help, and they're different. There's breathwork to help you manage, a state of anxiety, or stress. There's also breathwork that helps you focus. There's breathwork that helps you perform better as an athlete. So it's important to understand that there are nuances with breathwork. So when someone is a novice and is considering breathwork, don't just go for whatever is trending out there. Think about what your state is and what you need. So if you're constantly operating at a state of stress, you need to have a specific type of breathwork to help you manage that. And what I would say is again, there's another thing, which is the gap between knowing and doing, which is another issue. Like everyone knows that breathwork is good. It's being talked about a lot, and it's probably, the most available and accessible tool for you because it's in you, right? You have your breath with you all the time. But there's such a big gap between knowing it's good for you and actually being able to do it. And for a lot of people, it's sometimes they think it's like an additional task. So it's about also the mindset around what's stopping you when you know it's good to actually doing it. Sometimes it might be certain beliefs or skepticism. Sometimes it might just be the excuses that you're giving where you're not putting yourself first and then everything else comes before you, right? So I think it's also just thinking about the action, because one of the biggest things that we're finding is there's so much information out there. Everyone knows everything, but no one's doing anything. So we need to be able to find ways that we can actually embody the knowledge that we have. And now coming back to your question in terms of what is your advice in terms of, doing breath work? I think what would be good is if you can find a breath coach that can actually look at you personally. That's what I think is really relevant, because everyone's needs are different. So sometimes when we try and generalize our breathing techniques, sometimes, we may follow a online video, and those are great, but sometimes depending on the state of your nervous system, you need a different breathwork exercise. And as long as you have a specialist who's actually looked into that and then advised the right type of breathing techniques for you, that's important. The other thing is also to be able to have someone who can actually assess your breath. A lot of us don't realize how much we're breathing incorrectly. There's a lot of chest breathing. There's a lot of people breathing, sleeping with their mouths open. And then you think about all these cases, people are snoring, but then there's sleep apnea. And my biggest peeve is everyone's always looking for we have a Band-Aid syndrome. Everyone's looking for just the solution for the problem without actually thinking of the root of the problem. If you have sleep apnea, or if you're breathing through your nose and you're just waking up exhausted every morning, but not addressing your breath and then going for like a, getting a CPAP machine. But like sometimes these things, I think obviously there is medical reason to do these things, but I think you can kind of, if you have the right person assessing your breath, some of these things can be tackled before they even need real medical intervention. So what I would suggest is definitely try and see if you can work with someone who's a breathwork coach, for example. If that's not accessible, a retreat is good, but again, there's so many different retreats out there. So making sure that the one that you go to is the right one for you. A lot of breathwork retreats are usually based on intense breath work. So because they help you go down to the subconscious level. So like they go to, it's called altered states of consciousness breath work. And, they help you really like do some deep work in terms of uncovering your beliefs and things. So, like how you said, it's very hard for you to go into your subconscious, but there are certain ways that you can get into your subconscious, and breathwork's one of them. So you need to just make sure that the retreat that you're looking at is the right one for you. So I think it's very specific based on the person and where they're at. But I think the easiest thing to do is really go for someone or speak to someone or get an assessment from someone who's actually trained. And then you can stick to there's loads of apps that provide breathwork exercises. There's lots of things online. So yeah, there's a lot of resources, but I think you need to make sure that you've got the right thing.
You need the right prescription. Yeah, I hear you there, Disha. I think
That's really useful. I didn't even know like you could get like someone to assess your breath.
But I think this is it. I think with a lot of medical problems, I think especially if you're living, for example, we can only speak for we've only ever lived in the UK, but it's very much like you go to the doctor and they give you they make you well, they give you medicine. But absolutely right, it's not always kind of getting to the root cause of the issue. And I think this is where all of us have to take ownership for our own health, advocate for ourselves, and also just not rely on someone to fix you. But there's so many other alternative things out there, and it can seem a bit woo-woo because, oh, my doctor doesn't know about this, or I'm not, like you don't fit, it doesn't always come from the traditional ways of seeking support during for your health, but I think a couple of things I also wanted to add was, this might be slightly controversial, but I really think this like optimal wellness thing is just it's been taken like way too far. Like, how much protein are you having, how much sleep are you tracking, left every little thing, I'm not saying this is all bad stuff, but I'm just feeling like there's just so much out there, and there's this expectation, like if I take myself and my health seriously, that I need to be doing, am I hitting all my sleep goals, my nutrition goals, like my exercise goals, my number of steps, and my this, that, the other. And I just feel like sometimes we just need to chill out on it and just do what you can consistently, and it doesn't have to be like world breaking, or it doesn't have to be anything like super wild or anything. But I think going back to your point also on about like just doing the work for yourself so you can show up as the best version of yourself for the people around you, so important, guys. I think we all have a responsibility to show up as the best version of ourselves and to constantly work on ourselves for the betterment and the benefit of not just you, but every single person that you meet and everyone around you. I got once told that's selfish, and I found that really offensive. And I was like, actually, no, I don't think that, being the best version of myself is being selfish. Is because actually it's not just me that's benefiting, it is literally every single person who I am around. Disha, it's been so interesting to hear about a little bit about your journey and the work you're doing. I'm so proud that you managed to take time off, listen to yourself. They often say like the three catalysts for change are the three Ds, like the death, divorce, or diagnosis. And not saying you had any of those, but sometimes, we do need to have these wake up calls, and you listened to your body and you took action, which is brilliant. As we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you, Disha, if the little Disha was sitting in front of you now, like what advice would you give her?
I think I would just say like follow your intuition, because your intuition knows the truth, and it's very easy to get clouded by all the distraction, the noise, the rational thinking, trying to, make sense of everything. But I would just say, like, follow your intuition, because that is your true north. I just feel like everything happens for a reason. Trust the timing, trust what the universe is like sending your way, and it's all kind of taking you to, where you need to be. So
Yeah. So if you're listening to this right now, you're meant to be right here listening to this conversation. It is meant to be. And jokes aside, I actually truly believe that the universe has your back. And sometimes you can lose faith in that when things are not going right, or you're in a really difficult place, or you're facing challenges. You're just like, what's going on? Why is this happening? Or, I don't see light at the end of this tunnel. But I hope that you will find your way to rediscover your faith in that universe, because whatever it is, whatever you believe in, is a higher power or universe, you're always meant to be exactly where you're meant to be. So on that note, thanks very much, Disha. Enjoy the rest of your sabbatical.
And the World Cup.
Yes, the
Yeah,
football.
Yeah.
And
It's
following
been
the
amazing. It's been
journey.
amazing chatting to you. And as Tejal says, we very much look forward to seeing your journey.
yeah, and thank you for being such lovely hosts. I really enjoyed myself, and yeah, hopefully we can connect in person when I'm back in London.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and hit subscribe on YouTube so that you never miss a new one.
It really helps if you rate and review the show. And if you found this episode valuable, share it with a friend, family member, or colleague. We appreciate your support, and we will catch you next time. Bye bye.